And hey, Anne, we're still having some people join
Oh,
us. Good to see you guys.
yay. Hi.
And
Thank you so much. Yeah, I apologize. I was trying to go through all of the back and forth, but we're here and I'm so excited to just see you again, Lynn, and to be here with everybody.
yeah, it's
So,
so good to see you too. And it's been so great getting to know you through this journey and this project. So you had submitted one of your stories, your actual case stories, as we put out a call for stories to make potential videos for the Seen Through Horses campaign. And one of the things we look for with these videos or with these stories is something that really shows what the horse brings uniquely to the process and how that transforms, how those horses transformed lives in a way that you really couldn't get anywhere else. And we were so touched by your story, which is featured in the new film that was just released in this last week called Finding Home. And I mentioned people can go watch that on YouTube at Horses for Mental Health channel or on the horsesformentalhealth.org website. And so, and of course, it's an actual case story that we then condense into 3 minutes to try to
it's
show
amazing.
the power of what actually happened. And so I'm so excited to get to talk with you because then we get to hear a little bit more of the details and a little more of the story behind the scenes of what happened with that client and those horses, as well as just learn about the work that you do because it's so powerful with the work that you do with refugees and immigrants and foster care families. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Yana, to go ahead and introduce yourself and share a little bit about what you do in your program and your story, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you again. And it's such a privilege to just have that story chosen to be featured. Like I'm so touched, and my client was very touched too because I've shared it with her too. And yeah, it's a privilege to be featured in this, but also to do this work. So to just let anybody who may be just viewing us but not sure what we're all about, the Heart Space Fund is the Human Equine Attachment and Relational Therapy, and it's a nonprofit that we founded about 3 years ago with the help of a great board of volunteers, and then with the help of a few trauma-informed therapists. What we want to bring to the table is really equitable access for immigrants, refugees, and foster care families. So you may be wondering, how all this came about. So I'm an immigrant myself, and as an immigrant, I think one of the things that was pretty evident earlier on was that access to horses and to such a beautiful, peaceful setting, it's a privilege in most of the world, but also in the United States. So oftentimes, unless you take lessons, or unless you are invited, or unless you have an amazing friend like I did in Texas who just said, "Come along for trail rides." Um, this world can be closed off, right? And people can feel like they don't belong or they don't quite have access to it due to financial constraints. And um, after me being a therapist and doing an equine facilitated therapy since 2012, I think it became more and more important to just be able to give back. And it felt like the most meaningful way to give back is to those who have maybe least access or could potentially have least access to horses and to natural environment, and also psychotherapy, mental health. So about 3 years ago, when you know the news was covering a lot of the wars and a lot of the displacement, and of course I'm a trauma therapist, and all I could think about is like, gosh, this is heartbreaking, and what's going to happen to children and families who live through these events, and hope, move away, like either as refugees seeking asylum or as immigrants to other war-free zones. What's going to happen to them? How are they going to not only survive this psychologically, but ultimately learn to thrive, and to feel like they belong? I think that was the biggest theme of feeling like you belong in a new land with new people where a new language is spoken, new customs are all around you. um, so that's kind of, these are some pieces, like that's how it got inspired. This is a little bit of my story, and then of course my own experiences with horses, which have been as an adult. I didn't grow up around horses, didn't have access to them, although I'm lying, there were some neighbors who were absolutely wonderful, um, and who had horses, and so I would go out with the gypsy kids and get the horses out from the pasture. So I did have access to horses. So, yeah, so I think that these are just some of the stories and how they're coming together. And then in the work that I've done over the last few years, um, it became very clear that for families, but also for kids who have had pre-verbal trauma, who couldn't quite figure out why they had emotional outbursts, why they didn't belong, why they weren't doing anything right. Um, Talk therapy, as we all know as mental health professional, oftentimes has its own limitations. So I received some inquiries from a family who, you know, was on my wait list initially, but I was really impressed with their persistence and reaching back out and telling them that, you know, this felt like maybe one approach, that one last attempt and approach to help their daughter who had been adopted, and had struggled to really integrate and had pretty severe PTSD. So this is the story you all so amazingly illustrated in your video. We changed a little bit. We changed a few things so that she can't be fully identified, but we kept some key parts of the story because they're key parts of her story. Um, like she was adopted when she was 11, and then she came to the United States, and then there were several critical incidents, among which one was running away and police showing up, and it got very intense and traumatic for the entire family. And by the way, as I'm sharing this, just know that I shared with the client the other day, and she looked at me and she absolutely recognized and nodded that we touched upon the main points that were significant, both in terms of her trauma, but also in terms of her journey to get better. And she's one absolutely amazing human being. So throughout this story, and without my story with her, when she came in and we've first spent time out with the horses, she told me that she didn't want to talk to me, she didn't want to be in therapy, and she's not going to talk to me about the orphanage. And I was like, okay, we've got some clear boundaries. Question is, as a therapist, what do you do from there? Like, where do you go from there? And I don't know, there was something special that happened as we sat there in silence in one of those hay huts, listening to the horses munch. And as I gathered enough courage to speak to my client, I just shared the horses' stories. And most of them came from auctions and from slaughter. So they were just, you know, had their own trauma stories and their own stories. And that's how we connected. We connected with the horses munching hay and with the horses' stories. And yeah, that's my that's my one of the probably hardest and most fulfilling, ultimately, equine therapy sessions. So
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for sharing. I mean, first of all, thank you for the work you're doing to provide access to a lot of people from different countries around the world who would not normally ever have access to horses and the healing power that they can provide. And it was cool, yeah, to hear your personal story, your personal drive of being an immigrant yourself. And yeah, in this particular video story of finding home, it was really powerful to watch the process of, here's someone who, she shares in the video even about how she, you know, she had to come to this country. She didn't have a choice. It is different in the video. The video shows that she came with her family, and as you're sharing, the actual story is she was actually adopted at the age of 11 from an orphanage, and the struggles of that transition, and of course all the trauma she had endured in her previous life, and basically living a life with no choices of her own.
Right.
And I really was touched by that part of the story when, you know, her parents finally, they found you, which I'll be interested to hear how they found you. You know, they were being told, put her in a residential treatment center, this, her problems are too severe. But then how, when she did show up and she didn't want to do anything, you know, she was resentful, she doesn't want to do anything, and it was that, once again, she has no choice of where she has to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, because, and you were sharing a little bit about what you did there, because I was curious about, it was neat, because in the video even it shows about, over time, she's sitting there going, I'm going to make a choice, but I don't have to participate.
Right.
And you honored that. I mean, basically, that's what I was hearing you say, of just like, okay. And I wanted to know if you had any more thoughts about how you held that space for her to finally feel like she had choice and safety, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
because that seems like that was what the transition was, you know.
Yeah. I think I don't know, it's one of those things we learn about, but I think it's an intuitive process that we learn from the horses, to be honest, because ultimately we can't force the horses to do that much. They're 12 to 1400 pounds, and if they don't want to do something, they likely won't do it, and you can get hurt in the process. But I think that I've learned something else too, um, and she and I learned that together throughout working with my horse Max, um, over the years after that, is that patience and groundedness and just watching for an opening when either the client or the horse invites you in, when both of those defenses and distrust and all of the things that both horses and humans experience at the same time when they're traumatized, distrust, conflict over being in contact with another human being, all of that, that usually tends to, when we slow down, when we take a deep breath out, when we drop all of our agendas, when it's not about, I have clinical treatment goals, or I need to get the horse to a lesson, it's more about being there, noticing when their nervous system just gets to a point where they're in the green and they're open again for some form of social connection. I think that that's something that I probably no graduate school can teach us. I think it's something that we definitely learn with the horses. They're so sensitive and they're so honest, in terms of how they communicate, and that was a very important process with me and my client. And I would give her oftentimes feedback throughout the next few years we've worked together. I would give her feedback in terms of like, do you see when we're coming up with an agenda and with the excitement or stress level, do you see how they turn away? And sometimes, I mean, they booked it. I mean, they were out, and those were hard sessions for her, because bringing the energy down was not something that was easy for her, and it was a real life, real skill that had to be practiced over and over. Just because last session was great, it didn't mean that today was going to go the same, because the horses respond to our emotional states in the moment. So anyway, I hope that answered the question of how we've worked and how we do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was very beautifully shared and such an important reminder of holding that space for that process to happen. And Annie, thanks for your comments. We want horses to reach everyone around the world and providing choices and them honoring them
Yes,
too. Um, and
yes,
and
and
you were,
that's
yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
and that's why I was gonna say that's why our commitment and all of the therapists at our barn and the staff use positive reinforcement with our horses, because if we're trauma informed with humans, we decided that it was equally important to provide choices and consent and not punish our horses for not wanting to do what we asked them to do. So just wanted to add that part.
Yeah, and yeah, Annie, sure in here too. Horses teach us things that we can't find in textbooks, which is
Yes,
so true.
thank you.
And I think too, this again, this story doesn't totally portray the time frame you're talking about here, because you started working with her at what, like 15? Was it
Yeah, about I think
15
she
years
was
old?
15.
And
Yeah,
now she's 24,
25. Yeah,
25
and a
years
very
old.
successful adult. I mean, very very accomplished. Very she's an inspiration.
Yeah, and it's cool that one, no, this wasn't just a one like, ooh, this just happened to me. This was a journey. I mean, she had severe long-term traumatic experiences, and this was a journey between her, the horses, you guys, your space, over a lot of years. And
Yes.
I thought it was neat to see how part of that journey was, again, just that, like it shows in the film, about how the horse doesn't do what she wanted the horse to do, kind of thing. And she would get, her initial reaction and learned response, and her nervous system would be to have anger,
Hmm.
get upset, and how you guys worked through that. Is there any more thoughts about what that process was like, of just kind of working through developing those relationships, calming her nervous system, all that kind of thing?
And at the risk of sounding like very cliche, but I think again the horses had a lot to do with that. I'm very glad to be the co-facilitator and the therapist and the witness, but I think a lot of the times the horses, through their mere behaviors, were very clear in what was happening, whether they ran away from us, and that happened a couple of times, and she and I were both very disappointed. But the horses were just like, "Ooh, that's a lot of energy," and not today. And so that was a lot to process and to take in, um, and to just sit there with both of the discomfort. I don't know how to bring this down, but I can see the impact. And then opening to me for the therapeutic process, like, okay, what can we do? Or how can we get to into a space where the horses give us the green light again? We did many experiential exercises, including one of the times was just when she was much more regulated. We watched the horses. I don't know if you've seen those huge mega balls, colorful balls, and we put one of those in the arena, and the horses would not, like, they were just spooked and not. So we've talked about, she and I agreed that we needed to take them out of the arena, either them or the ball. So we wanted to give the horses a choice to look at the ball, to approach it on their own time, to be rewarded, and to know that it's safe to approach it. So we've done a lot of work in terms of, okay, how do we work, and how do we approach triggers? How do we, or activating stimuli, how do we go back to things that put our nervous system into flight or fight or flight? So there were a lot of amazing things that we learned with the horses, and she was the one who was, I mean, no, I think we need to take the ball out. We need to give Max time to adjust to that ugly pink humongous ball. And I remember that that was a meaningful session for us, And I don't think we sat and processed for more than 5 minutes. She was at the point where it, it was mostly experiential. And then sometimes that's what's amazing about our work. Sometimes you're wondering what happened, and I want to put words to it so badly, but it's not my job to put words to everything that the client is saying or doing or experiencing. So I had to be patient. And later on, I got a message from her mom that she got home, and later on, she shared what she had witnessed with Max, and it gave her a lot of insight in terms of how she needs to approach things that make her freak out. And like that's also to acknowledge that she has the most amazing family and supportive, and they've worked so closely and tried to understand her and to support her every step of the way. But it was just one of those things that, we don't always hear how things clicked in with our clients. So for me to get that message, it might have been a text, it might have been an email from mom, but where she was like, yeah, she told me all about it. And she was like, she had so much insight into how she should handle stressful situations. And I was like, wow. And that did not, I did not know how much happened in that session for her. So that's the other gift of equine therapy. Like sometimes these experiences are powerful, and they lead up to the client making their interpretations and learning and taking wisdom. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's neat that you had the opportunity to be on this journey with her for these years,
Yes.
and it was cool to hear how she's committed now. Her profession is working with animals even, and how she
Yes.
brought that into her life. And I think I know when we chatted, you mentioned that now it's more like she contacts you when she just needs kind
Yeah.
of like
Yeah.
I need a check in. I need a time to kind of recenter myself.
Yeah.
And which is really cool that she's, like you said, doing so well and taking care of herself and has gained those skills. And I thought it was neat that you said so. She just happened to be coming just this week to
Yes.
visit you, and so she got to watch the video. Could you share about how she responded to watching her story again, like especially all these years later when she's in a really good spot in her life, and then just watch her story.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I told her because she was excited about a few other things she wanted to share with me, but um, I said, can I share something with you? Something, because I had shared a little bit about the nonprofit and how she inspired that story. I wanted her to know that a few years back, but um, yeah. So she watched it, and every time it was one of those crucial points that she recognized. She just looked at me and she's like, "Yeah, so it was super sweet to also have that relationship, and that there was no defensiveness. It felt like she she felt like she could share that with me and with the world, because this was done. And I told her that I want to protect her confidentiality, but I wanted to, if I had her permission, to share some of it. And for her to be at the point where she's okay with sharing her story, and she's okay with watching it with me, and she's okay with seeing where her life goes next. And I think these were all things that I think neither one of us maybe thought were quite possible 10 years ago. So yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah.
she was very excited, and very like, oh my gosh, yeah, I recognize this part. So
Oh, well, it's really special that were able to have that moment with her, and that she, experienced the story in that way. And just that, again, working with the population of refugees, immigrants. I know you work with foster care families too.
yeah.
Are there thoughts you have for people on this live too? And if anybody has any questions, feel free to put it
Yeah.
in the chat about working with this population, and how are you getting the word out? I mean, how did this family find you, and how is this being funded, or what are you doing to serve refugees and immigrants and foster care families in your community?
So yeah, those are very good practical questions. I honestly think that my client's mom was referred by a psychiatrist or somebody who found me online and actually didn't know them. Um, and since then, we've connected with, we partner up with Nova Raft, which is an organization, it's a nonprofit helping Afghan refugees get settled in the Northern Virginia area. And we have made some attempts to connect with some organizations also in DC. And more recently, we formed this partnership with Foster the Family DC, which serves Virginia, Maryland, and DC foster care families. And I think they have hundreds of families that they're actually supporting through um, lots of events, but lots of tangible things. So I'm trying right now, rather than reach people individually, which wouldn't say that I wouldn't say that wouldn't work, but it's a lot of it would be a lot of effort, and we don't know necessarily where to find them. We're partnering up with nonprofits that already have that community visibility. And this event that we have scheduled for June 8th booked up the first day they've opened it up to their community. And so the families are not paying for anything. They're scholarships that we've with funds we've raised last year actually, and funds have continued coming in. But again, if anybody wants to spread the word and get some more donations, we're very excited. And the funds really go towards, again, scholarships. If we identify a family that perhaps would really benefit from working together to resolve some of the trauma, as we've shared with my client, it takes years for the attachment trauma to get addressed. I think we would like to support long term some of the families, and we have a fantastic team of trauma informed therapists who this is what they do, and they're also culturally informed, and we're continuing to learn about everybody who comes through our doors. Again, the funding would go towards funding towards paying some of these therapists for their time. We've done numerous events so far, and they've put in countless hours of volunteer work. So it would be nice to just have a little stipend, even if it's just a fraction of what they would get paid in private practice. It's particularly if it's on a weekend. So, and then of course the funds would also go towards Equibliss and towards funding the ponies and their treats. So yeah, I think that those are some of the logistical things that, you know, yeah, it's hard to share. It's a little bit harder to share how do we make this happen? But we're making it happen. We're very committed to making it happen for our community.
Yeah, and of course, yeah, great idea for partnering is in the chat here, and just yeah, it takes a lot of collaboration for things like
Yes.
this. And if people wanted to reach out to you to ask questions or learn more, how would they do that?
Yeah, and any other questions that you all might have, we're more than happy to answer them. You can either like us on the Heart Space Fund page, like on Instagram, Facebook. Our email is heart.space.fund@gmail, just to make it easy for everybody. So please get in touch with us. Please share our page. We will try to share some of our stories about our own horses, because they've had their own journey of traveling and arriving to us. We have two thoroughbreds and a Mustang who's been displaced numerous times. And our herd really have also they've found home here. So that's another one of the parallel stories with the clients and the people we welcome here. So.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And so, yeah, thank you for sharing your story, for sharing this. I mean, getting to see the outcome too, the process, because sometimes it can be, sometimes we're wondering like, is this really making a difference? And
Right.
to be able to kind of get to see a process all the way through like that. And thank you for sharing that, and your client as well, and your whole team. It's amazing. And then also, yeah, thanks to Horses for Mental Health and the Seen Through Horses campaign.
Yes.
And thanks to the sponsors, OS Equine, because that was what provided the funding to put on this amazing campaign to spread awareness and raise funds and to make these really nice videos to spread the word. So feel free, you guys, to share these videos, put them on your websites, use them as it fits for you and your programs to spread the word about how horses impact these kind of services so much and change lives. And then yeah, and part of the campaign is to donate. It goes through May 31st, and it's on a good track this year to double what, this is the third annual campaign, so we're on track to double what, at least double what we did last year. So I know each year it can grow when we're all supporting it together, and even a small donation is another way to show we're all behind this effort and we support these programs, even if it's not your own program. Please, it really
Yes.
helps to spread the word. So we really appreciate everybody collaborating together on that. Yeah, thanks. There's some thank you for sharing comments. Thanks, everybody. And then where can we find the videos? So go to horsesformentalhealth.org, go to the stories page, or the YouTube channel at Horses for Mental Health on YouTube. And there's a bunch of different wonderful stories. We've gotten to have behind the scenes lives as well, about the recent rural mental health video, as well as the Uncovering Secret story that was all released, 3 new videos for this year. And then a video will be re-released on Monday for Memorial Day called Breathe, about a veteran story, which is amazing. That was one I was actually the first video we actually made, was that particular video in the first campaign when we embarked on this amazing concept to see if this will work. And it really is. It's helping us spread the word in amazing ways. So, oh, good. Thanks. Thank you for putting, Autumn put the actual link even to the actual video. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. Well, are there any other thoughts that you want to share, Yana, before we wrap up our time together?
Yeah, I think I'm just incredibly just grateful. I think the visibility, this is not just about the individual visibility of each program or each story, but I think it raises awareness in terms of people nationwide and worldwide, in terms of addressing mental health concerns in a different way. When talk therapy maybe doesn't reach as far, that this is an approach that is incredibly effective and has helped a lot of people, particularly with trauma. And it's also something that, many of these nonprofits are actually fighting really hard to make it more accessible, whether in rural communities, veterans, immigrants, refugees. I mean, all of these places that maybe people would think, oh, this is out of my reach, this is not what I would be able to access normally. So, and I think that that's thanks to you guys and your sponsors, I mean, for making it, reach farther than our communities.
Yeah, thank you. I know this is partly, I mean, you shared so well why this is a passion project for me to do this campaign is because you guys work so hard in these organizations. You sacrifice so much to make this accessible, and whatever we can do to keep supporting that and uplifting all that you guys do and the horses do is just something I'm passionate about. So I thank you. Thank you for being here on our call
Yes.
today to share behind the scenes, because I think it's always so interesting to get to hear a little more of the details in the story. So if you guys haven't seen the video yet, now you'll have kind of this background.
Yeah.
It'll be fun to kind of get a little bit more of the story. And I know the recording will be posted up on Instagram as well if you missed some of it. But really appreciate. Thank you,
Thank
Yana,
you. Thank
again.
you so much. It was great seeing you again, Lynn, and I look forward just working together again in the future. So
Absolutely. I
thank,
need to
thanks
thank
for,
you guys for joining us. It's
yes,
so good to see you. We'll see you guys next time.
see you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all.